Welcome to the Hardcore MBA podcast with your host, Erlend, Bakke. Would you like to have a free copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Never Work Again? All you have to do is rate, review, and subscribe to Hardcore MBA podcast on iTunes and email us a screenshot of your review to erlend@mroutsource.com.
Hello, Erlend Bakke here, signing in from beautiful, beautiful Oslo. It's actually not that beautiful here today. It's getting cold, it's getting dark, but that's just the turn of the world, right? So today I'm really excited because I have Rodney King on the call here. Welcome to the call.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you came on this show and what's led to your journey here?
Well, I'm an entrepreneur, but that wasn't always the case. I live in south side of Johannesburg in government housing. So very similar to the projects in the United States. My neighborhood was full of gangs. The school was full of bullies. And I was severely bullied as a kid, and my mother was an alcoholic. And ultimately, what it led to was that I got kicked out of the house in grade 10, so I never finished high school. And I found myself out on the street, sleeping on a park bench that I actually played in as a kid, with about $20 in my pocket and no prospects for the future. But wow. I decided to turn that all around, and today I'm considered a successful entrepreneur. I created 2 modern martial lifestyle brands that are in over 15 countries around the world. And I'm blessed. And it's pretty amazing that all came from a really rough background where I guess a lot of people would have quit, but I decided I didn't want to, and I changed my life.
So what kept you going in that phase? I mean, I've never had anything like that happen to me. I thought that, getting fired from my dream job that's like the toughest thing that ever happened to me. My girlfriend cheated on me when I was 20. That was tough, but I can never have imagined getting thrown out and barely having money to live for. That's a very different reality.
Yeah, the thing is, the most important kind of thing that really changed my life was that I was involved in martial arts. And now, really, in order to get, without the martial art experience, I'm not entirely sure where I would have ended up.
So what is it about martial arts that is so awesome?
Well, it's many things, and I think one of the major things for me is this idea of inner management, which, you never get a class in that when you're at school, right? You learn all these things, but nobody ever teaches you how to manage your emotions effectively, how to think effectively. Martial arts is one of those things that invariably, even though you learn it, quote unquote, how to fight, through that process, you are embodying inner management skills. Oftentimes, and one of the things that you realize very quickly in martial arts is that you're not completely present in the moment. It can get you into trouble. I mean, I can be, thinking about the future. I can be thinking about something that happened in the past. But one thing that's not going to change is the person in front of me throwing punches at me. He's still going to hit me in the face. So at the end of the day, you realize that being present, being in the moment is crucial to peak performance. And I think that's really what I really consciously, but just through the training, that once I found myself out on the street and I was, I had no prospects for the future, I was really able to keep myself present and take each day by day and start setting a course of action that would ultimately lead me to success and where I am today.
So is that what fuels you today? Is it kind of having seen that dark side of life and then being able to daily get through it and then finding out a unique methodology that other people can use?
Absolutely. And so on the one side, when I reflect back to that time, growing up poor without anything, if you don't have anything, then anything you get from then onwards seems like a blessing. And so just that in itself is enough to get me up in the morning and to work really hard, to set goals, to achieve them, because I never want to go back there. I know that, many of the people that I grew up with either have stayed in those kinds of environments or have gone on to being in prison, which is typically the case, and derailed their life. And so what I'm passionate about now is using these inner management skills that I'd learned, that I developed through my martial art practice, especially over the last 2 decades, and teaching that to other people. And I find myself working with such a diverse group of people these days, right from special force military operators to entrepreneurs, to anyone who wants to achieve more success in their life.
So when you go out and you work with special forces and entrepreneurs, it's interesting the parallel between special forces and entrepreneurs, because it's a very different reality. From my perspective, when I became sort of a sort of startup business entrepreneur when I was 20, I can't remember if I was 26 or 27, but it was a very, very different reality than I was used to. I thought, I kind of grew up in a comfortable life, but then when I was thrown out into that world, where, if you don't have money, you don't have money, that was very, very difficult for me. And it similar to you, it brought me down to a place where I went, okay, I never ever want to be here again, and I will do anything in my power to avoid, being in sort of darkness. So what is the parallel that you see between Navy SEALs and entrepreneurs?
Well, I haven't worked with Navy SEALs, but I've worked with Slovak Special Forces, amongst others. I think they probably all share very common character traits. One of the things, of course, is that they're adaptable, that they can make changes on the fly, that they are tenacious, that, once they've set their mind to something, they're going to achieve that objective. Obviously, in their role, if they make a mistake, they would, lose their life. That may not necessarily, obviously, be the same as an entrepreneur, although it does feel like that sometimes, right? And so that's where I draw the parallels, is that I have a saying that performance is performance. So outside of the fact that, for example, special force military operators have to go into a situation where they could potentially lose their life, I would argue that many of the inner obstacles that they have to face, be it, not feeling confident, but still having to make the moves to achieve the success that they need to, overcoming and managing their fear more effectively. You could imagine that is something that they would have to be able to do, is very much what entrepreneurs have to do. I mean, I think what never gets talked about is that a lot of entrepreneurs that I meet have immense knowledge. And if you don't know something, you can go and find it out quite easily today on the internet. But what tends to hold them back and what they don't recognize is their inner opponent. That's the very thing that doesn't allow them to achieve success. It's not a lack of knowledge. It's just a lack of inner management skills. And I think that's really been my saving grace, is that I recognized that earlier on. One of the things I could probably put down to that is that I've always been very self-aware, and that self-awareness has helped me monitor my internal landscape more effectively. And in doing that, I've been able to overcome things that I've seen many other people who have been unable to do that. And that's the thing that stops them. And I see that with entrepreneurs. For example, I guess for a lot of people, perfection is a big thing. People are always waiting for things to be 100% perfect before they make a move. And anyone who is in business knows that perfection is an illusion. And if you don't get moving, you're going to be left behind. Well, the only way to get moving is, outside of the knowledge base that you need, is, do you have that tenacity, that tenaciousness to actually move? Can you actually manage your fear effectively so that you can move into the direction towards the goals that you've set yourself? In my experience, more often than not, it's that inner opponent that holds people back. And no matter if you're working with special force military operators, world-class combat athletes, to entrepreneurs, that to me always seems to be the main thing that comes up, oftentimes not recognized. But once you show people that it is the thing that's holding them back and how to overcome it, how to manage it more effectively, it's like rocket fuel. Before you know it, the people are moving towards their goals and achieving success.
I remember sort of in 2010, I was at a point where I just didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to pull the curtains. I didn't want to see the sun. I just wanted to just lie down, basically in fear. Fear of not being able to pay my bills, fear of not being able to pay people, shame of not being a bigger success, of a more successful. And I had this stuck feeling of fear and and I didn't know what to do. However, what I've learned is this basically two things: move and breathe. It sounds very simple, but the trick for me when I come into challenging situations now is to move and breathe. And that's what I think about when these situations come up for me. You talk about breath as well. First of all, why do we get, when we are in this state of just lying down and sort of giving up to a certain extent, why does that happen with us?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting that you note that the two ways that you overcame that was by moving and breathing. So let's kind of just address this idea of breath. Is that typically what happens is, when we're in a high stress situation or we're feeling completely stressed out, that's our sympathetic nervous system kicking off. That's the part that gets you ready to fight or to flee. And in this sense, what you were talking about was to flee, right? To not actually move towards the thing that you knew you needed to move towards. That was really the fear. It's a heightened state of being. And when you kind of talked about the idea of breath, because that's interesting, is that what they found through research is that when you focus on your exhale, what you do is you kick in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite to the sympathetic nervous system. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system is that part of your autonomic nervous system that brings down that fight and flight response and gets you back to a balanced or homeostasis state, which makes things feel a lot more achievable. I'd also suggest that definitely one of the things that often puts people in a fear state is the story that they attach to what's happening. And, just as you were describing it, there was a story, there was a narrative around that. Now, that story can be so powerful and so overwhelming that it can seem like a reality. The kind of interesting thing is that even if you're feeling that way, you're feeling all the self-doubt, it still doesn't change the fact that, you probably would still feel that even if you move towards your goal. So either you sit back and feel self-doubt, or you move towards your goal and you still feel apprehensive. But the difference is exactly what you said. You're moving towards your goal. And what you tend to find is that when you make movement, when you move towards something rather than run from it, you start feeling that sense of control that you weren't feeling before. So before, you're completely feeling out of control. Now, all of a sudden, when you start moving towards something and managing the way that you're feeling, and one of the ways that you suggested, which is a great way, is through just focusing on the exhale, specifically the exhale, because that's the part that kicks in that parasympathetic nervous system. It does feel like you can take on things that you couldn't take on before. But one of the most important things there is learning, and this is where self-awareness comes in, and Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this a lot, about self-awareness, understanding that thoughts and feelings are not reality. They may seem like they're real, but they're not. They're just fragments of history. That just, it's something that's come with you from past experiences. If you don't attach to them, if you don't give them power, if you don't hook you, then they can't control you. And if they can't control you, even though you might be feeling not in the best place, you find that you can still move towards your goal. And if that wasn't the case, you wouldn't have been able to do that, right? You would have completely given up. You would have kept the curtains closed, and you wouldn't have got out of bed. But that proves that even though you were feeling that way, you were still able to move towards your goal, which tells you that thoughts and feelings aren't real. Because if they were real, you would never have been able to get out of bed.
Well, to be honest with you, I hadn't really looked into a lot of personal development stuff. I'd been reading a lot of business books. But basically what I did after in 2010 was attend Tony Robbins in LA. And then I started getting into this whole pursuit of sort of personal development, self-growth, as I call it. And that's been a very interesting journey, and probably it will be one for life, I believe. But I didn't know about breath, about how when you exhale, that the exhale is actually what creates the what did you call it?
Well, it's the parasympathetic nervous system. So if you think about it, you have this thing called the autonomic nervous system, hence the word autonomic. It's automatic. It's outside of your conscious awareness. So you've got two, I'm simplifying it, but you've got two basic systems there. You've got the sympathetic nervous system that gets you ready for the fight or to flee. So when you feel, adrenaline and the butterflies and all those kinds of things, that's your sympathetic nervous system kicking off. Your parasympathetic nervous system is that part that generally kicks in after a high stress situation. So if you've ever been in a highly stressful situation, people, for example, that maybe you've been in a motor vehicle accident, the minute you're in an accident, sympathetic nervous system kicks off. It's getting you ready to survive the situation. But you don't want to stay there too long, because the same chemicals that helped you, those hormonal changes that helped you get ready for a fight, can also become damaging if they stay too long in your body. So the parasympathetic nervous system comes in and says, hold on, I'm going to help you out, and I'm going to calm you down and rebalance all your hormones. Well, you can't consciously do that. And I think anybody who's had that experience where they're feeling anxious and they might say to themselves, stop feeling anxious, relax. How many times have you said to yourself, relax, and it didn't make any difference? And you can't, because you don't have any conscious control over it. But the one way to engage with that parasympathetic nervous system is actually through the exhale. So when you exhale, it engages that parasympathetic nervous system. It gives you a measure of control over this system that's totally, automatic, that you would never have otherwise. And so, this kind of approach can be used anyway. I mean, it's, even for example, if you talk about, snipers understand the importance of breath and why it's so important to focus on the breath, because the last thing that they want to be is highly stressed out prior to taking a shot. So, that out breath becomes super important even for them, because what it does is it keeps them calm and it lowers their heart rate. So it's something that anybody can use, regardless of where they find themselves. I know that some of my clients, because I teach them this on the mat through a martial art process, which I think is a wonderful way to do it, because then you have the embodied experience of it. It's not just me having a conversation with somebody. You can actually feel the shift. You can feel the shift from being highly anxious to being more in a position of control by focusing on the breath. I know that some of my entrepreneurial clients will kind of close the office door, sit down, just focus on the out breath, take just 10 minutes out, just kind of be with the breath, and then go out and handle the situation. That typically what they might have done is, kind of attached to their emotions, flown off the handle, and then ended up doing something that they regretted later on.
So I remember the very first podcast episode that I did. I was a little bit nervous, but I did it anyway. My point of saying this is that when we have some kind of fear towards doing something, but we want to do it, and then having the ability to sort of move and breathe through it, why is that so important? So, the breaking of the bricks, the breaking of the arrow, whatever. Why are these things so important in terms of personal development?
Well, I think it's a multifaceted question, but I think one of the things that you do, and you potentially are doing it unconsciously, but can you imagine if you did it consciously, it would make a huge difference, is that by moving and breathing, as you've been describing, what you tend to do is you put yourself in a more present state. And when we're talking about performance, either now on a podcast where we have to talk to each other and we've never talked to each other before, maybe you're pitching an idea to a group of investors, whatever that may be, but you have to perform, the thing that's going to get you into trouble is if you start kind of projecting into the future, so thinking about things that haven't happened yet, or holding on to the past. Maybe you're in a situation again where you've messed up before, and now you're thinking about the fact that you messed up. Both of those move you away from the present moment. And the more you move away from the present moment, the harder it is for a person to perform at their best. So all this inner management training really comes down to essentially one thing. How close can I get to the present moment? And I'm talking specifically here about performance. Of course, there is a time and a place to set goals, think about the future, reflect on the past so you don't keep making the same mistakes over and over.
But maybe
when you actually have to perform in the moment, that's the key. Then you have to be present.
But maybe when you are then, so if you are thinking about, so when you are thinking about the future, do you then maybe sit down and say, okay, now I'm going to sit down, I'm going to visualize the ideal outcome for the situation, so that you kind of train your brain. So a lot of athletes they'll like visualize their serve, going in. It's an ace, like the perfect serve in tennis. That kind of visualization. And so if you're giving that presentation, can you then sit down and then visualize the ideal outcome? Is that okay in terms of performance, or would you what do you think about that?
No, because the problem with that is that imagine you in the midst of a performance, right? You're in the midst of giving a speech. There's no opportunity now to take a step back. You have to continue, like it or not. Well, you cannot continue, but then you're not going to be able to give the presentation that you wanted to, and obviously you're now going to be embarrassed, and you may not get the contract or whatever you're pitching for, the investment that you need. What you really want to do is you don't want to attach to what is happening inside. So regardless that you may be having future thoughts or you're holding on to past mistakes, the objective in the moment is to bring yourself back gently to the present moment, to move yourself away from past and future. Now, there's many strategies to do that, depending on the approach. One of those, of course, which is very prevalent in this day and age, is mindfulness training, which really, what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is my ability to be completely present in the moment without judgment, in a very simple way of defining it. So can I be completely present in this experience without attaching to an outcome, which would be a future thought, or worrying about what went wrong the day before, or maybe worrying about the fact that I don't feel completely in a position to present what I am. I don't feel that I've done my homework enough. Either one of those isn't going to change the fact that I have to perform right now. I think the idea of the visualization is good when you're actually not performing. So maybe as a pre-performance process, maybe you're in your hotel room in the morning, you're getting ready for this pitch. You may sit down, put yourself in a present state, focus on your out-breath, which helps you get into that present moment, then go through a visualization process where you see how this pitch is going to unfold, and see it how you exactly want it to unfold. But once you step on the stage, so to speak, then you want to be completely present in the moment. You don't want to be attached. You don't want to give a story. You don't want to be hooked into thinking about what you should be saying next, because that's the kind of stuff that will trip you up, and maybe you'll still get through it, but you're going to walk away from that, and everybody else is going to walk away from that thinking, well, you didn't really do your homework. You didn't really know what you were talking about on that day. And there's another aspect to that as well. We can talk about it, is the way that you present your body says a lot to other people. So it's not just about what's going on in my head and how I'm managing that. It's also about how am I presenting my body to the audience, because that will change their relationship to me and their perception of me as well.
So visualization in the morning or before, in terms of sort of visualizing what's going to happen. But when you're performing, be in the moment, go with it, flow with it.
Yeah, and that takes practice. I'm not going to lie. I've been practicing it for many years, and your brain gets so conditioned to always projecting into the future and to the past that being present is a very difficult thing. So this is the thing that I always tell people, is that the principles of success actually aren't that hard to understand. What is hard is the mastery of that. So we're talking about this, and anybody can get this idea. Okay, so you want me to be present. You don't want me to be focusing on the future or attached to the past. Sounds easy, but when you actually have to master that, it's a completely different thing. It's one of the reasons why people practice, meditation. Meditation is a way to steady and center the thinking mind, so that you can teach yourself to be present. Because, again, very easy, well, not very easy, but easier to do if I'm sitting in a nice candlelit room, with with the soothing music in the background, and I'm sitting on my zafu and I'm meditating, compared to when I'm actually in the shitstorm, so to speak, the chaos of everyday life, and now I have to be present. Try to be that when people are upset with you, when they're shouting at you, or maybe you're giving a pitch and you can see based on their facial expressions, at least your perception is that it's not really going down too well. Maybe the way that they kind of adjusting their presence is telling you that they don't really like your pitch. These are the things now that are really difficult to manage, and now being present isn't that easy. That's why it takes enormous amount of practice. And unfortunately, like I said earlier on, none of us ever went through a schooling system where we were ever taught inner management skills. We were taught a lot of stuff, but never taught how to manage what arises inside. And now, could you imagine if you came from an educational system where you actually were taught how to manage your emotions more effectively, how to have better thinking skills, how to set goals, how to manage your expectations? How would the world look? I think we would have a lot more successful people and a ton more successful entrepreneurs than we do have.
Why do you think the school system doesn't teach that?
Well, it's kind of an interesting question. My kind of gut answer to that is the schooling system came really, as we know it today, through the Industrial Revolution, and it was designed to get a bunch of people to work in factories, to put widgets on, to connect widgets. That's really what it came down to. So it's a way of getting people that came out of a farming environment to follow instructions. Yes, step 1, yes, step 2, yes, step 3. The problem is that as you realize, especially as an entrepreneur, and I've realized that there is no instructions for business. You have to be adaptable. You have to be able to think on the fly. Things change from day to day. And I think that's why, if you look at successful entrepreneurs, that's what they've managed to achieve versus people who try to go at it, but just don't seem to be able to get it right.
Just going back to the to the question earlier, why is it important to move through your fears? So let's say you want to be a public speaker, but you're scared of public speaking. Why is it important to get in front of people and speak?
Well, I think the first thing is that have you made that decision that that's something you want to do? Because it's pointless doing something that you don't feel that's important. So that's number one. Is it important to go out if public speaking is something you fear? You realize it's something you want to do. It's something that will help you achieve. Number one. Number two is that, to me, this is the interesting thing about, okay, let's say I don't do it because my fear is so overwhelming and I just decide I'm not going to do it. Well, fear is there, right? But if I go and do it, fear will also be there. So either way, fear is still going to be there. The difference is that once you decide to move towards your goal, once you decide that you're going to do it regardless of the fear, what you've done is you've taken a massive step to not control the fear, but rather to manage it. So I would say, for example, like one of my things is that I don't feel, not come across on the interview, is that I don't think that my interview process or my skills are that great, because I do much better in person with somebody on the mat than actually, talking as we are now. But regardless of how I feel about it, I know that it's important for me and to get work out there and for people to know what I'm doing. And if I decided to do it, all the apprehension and the fear is still going to be there. That's not going to go away. So once I decide to do it, the fear and apprehension is still there, but the difference is now I'm actually doing it. And what I realize is that regardless that I feel a certain way, I can still do it. And that's always been an interesting thing for me, is that martial arts has taught me that even though you might be feeling fear or you might have negative, thinking going on, or self-doubt, that doesn't mean you can't perform. You can still get out there and you can still perform regardless of how you're thinking and you're feeling. You only have to have a few experiences like that to realize that it's possible. And once you realize that, then you're on the road to getting to the point where nothing can back. I don't really like that term fearless, because I don't think there's a thing that exists unless you're a psychopath, right? At the end of the day, fear is always present. It's how do you manage that fear? I prefer that way of describing it, that it's about managing it. I might still feel the fear of doing these podcast interviews, but I'm doing them. I've learned to manage it. I recognize that it's there. And the difference is as I'm speaking to you, I'm not attaching a story or a narrative to it. If while I'm talking to you, my thinking mind's going off on about how much this really, is uncomfortable for me, then guaranteed what's going to happen is it's going to be very difficult for me to continue the interview, to continue to talk. I'm going to raise my anxiety level because as I'm thinking about it, my heart rate's going to go through the roof. And before you know it, you've spiraled into a vortex that you can't get out of.
What kind of daily habits make you successful? So what kind of daily habits do you do that you feel that you get a lot of power and energy from?
Well, one of the things that I do that's really helped me out is I get up in the morning and I answer all my emails straight off the bat. I get all the emails out the way. And then immediately after that, I spend minimum of 30 minutes in meditation. And I find that allows me to kind of let go of the frenzy of answering all the emails. Because I don't know, I guess it's different for every person, but I find answering all those emails in the morning kind of stressful because you feel like you kind of need to get back to people. They're waiting on hearing from you. And once I've done that and I've gone through my meditation routine, I feel a lot more focused and energized for the day. One of the other things that I do every single day without question is I always take a power nap in the afternoon. I find that taking a power nap is huge in putting me in a position where I can perform because I find that a lot of times, especially when I'm working with entrepreneurs, is they push themselves almost to the point of total exhaustion. And my advice to them is you need to take time out during the day, and a power nap's a good way to do that, even if it's just 20 minutes. Obviously, on that, they say, I'll take 20 minutes. 20 minutes is a lot of time. But I'm like, well, you don't realize how much inefficiency you're actually producing when you're working at this point of exhaustion. You're never going to know that. So actually, 20 minutes might be very little time to give up because what you're probably doing is you're losing at least 2 to 3 hours a day where you're being completely inefficient because you're working, at a state where all you want to do is just fall over and pass out.
And I guess 20 minutes isn't a lot if you're dead.
Exactly. 20 minutes isn't a lot if you're dead. And I think that's another thing, and you probably found this as well, is that, as entrepreneurs, we're so focused on achieving success and achieving our goals that oftentimes we let our health slide as well. And if you're after your body, then I just can't see how you can perform because none of these things that we've decided we want to achieve as entrepreneurs is possible without the body that we have. And so I think entrepreneurs need to look at it in that light and say, the body is crucial to my success. And if I don't look after it, and especially my inner game, that ability to go out there, like we've been talking about, achieve your goals. But when you need to be with other people and switch off, then you need strategies to be able to do that as well. One of the things that often comes up when I talk to entrepreneurs is they talk about how stressful it is for them coming home. They just can't switch off from the day. And they're there with their kids, but they're not really there with their kids.
Right.
And so all these things that we're talking about in management skills also help with that as well.
I think there's a saying that if you take care of your body, it'll take care of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's important. And when we talk about the body, we look at it as a complete system, that mind and body are not separate. So the way that you use your body, the way that you show up in the world is going to affect your thinking mind. Just as your thinking mind is going to affect your body state. It's a feedback loop and it works off each other. So it's very important to be cognizant of that and to respect both mind and body, but to understand that they're not separate, they're one.
So how can we use our body to be more successful, if that's the point?
Sure. Well, lots of great research actually coming out on this is the idea of how you hold your body changes your physiology, which changes the way that you think about yourself. And if that, of course, what you're going to find is depending on how you hold your body, if it's changing the way that you're thinking about yourself, it can either be in a positive or in a negative kind of way. So, for example, if you, as simple as this sounds, but if you go into a situation where, for example, I was talking earlier about pitching an idea to a group of investors, even though you might know, if you're standing there, you're not making eye contact, you kind of slouched, your shoulders are rolled over, your head's kind of off to one side, or maybe you're looking to the floor, even if you're presenting a really valid proposition, the body language that you are giving off, because 70% of communication is body language, saying something completely different to the people looking at you. So by just kind of pulling your shoulders back, standing upright, making eye contact, utilizing your body to help you talk more effectively. So what you tend to find is that, you can try this. Try and talk to people, but don't move your hands. It's really difficult. You don't feel that you can be so fluid about the way. But if you move your hands with a kind of an open palm gesture, it really helps the quality of how you talk. So the way, what things that are coming out just sound a whole lot better. And just by making those subtle adjustments in your body, what is actually happening is your body is changing, your hormones are changing. And as that changes, it's affecting your body. And then that affects the way that you think, and then that changes the way that you feel about the situation. So the tagline that I often use is that the way you show up in the world matters more than you think.
So everything's connected. So you stand tall, you breathe deeper, you're more confident, you'll feel more flow. Does that also affect how you feel in the present, or does that not have any?
Well, I think, the more present you are, the more those things that you just described come into effect. I would argue that if you're finding that these aspects that you just mentioned are not aligning up properly, it's likely because you are not present. And so the more you can get to that moment, the more you can be at a place where you are completely aware, both internally and externally, but without judgment. So whatever arises, there might be these feelings, there's sensations that arise, but you're not judging them, you're not labeling them in the sense that giving a story, a narrative around them. That is a powerful place to be, because now you will find that you can, quote unquote, find yourself in a flow state where you're able to give your best performance, whatever that happens to be. Be that a presentation, a speech on maybe you have to give a speech to a group of people, pitching an idea, talking to your employees is huge. The closer you can get to the present moment, I've seen in my own experience and through my research is that when people are more present, they feel their communication skills are more powerful because they feel more connected to the people that they're talking to. Because oftentimes when we're talking to somebody, what we tend to do is maybe we kind of like preempting in our mind what they might be saying next, and then we almost setting up a situation, how are we going to reply to that? And while you're there, you're completely missing that connection and you're not fully immersed in the conversation that's happening right in front of you because you're no longer in the present moment. And so we could argue that a lot of times, a lot of communication isn't communication because people's thinking minds are elsewhere. They're all over the place. I mean, it's not uncommon these days, as you move around the world. But, one person on their BlackBerry or their iPhone, the other person's on their iPad, and that's not communicating with each other. Mindful, you're able to be more present with people, which, as an entrepreneur, that's very important, that you're able to connect with the people that you need to fully and be completely there with them, because that's the kind of experience that builds relationships, strong bonds that you want in your business world.
When people get stressed, they also get dumb. Is that the case? Is that what you've seen in research as well? That if I feel really, really stressed about a situation and I go in and I'm really, really stressed and then people ask me questions and I can't answer, but I know the answer. Is that, does stress make you dumb, basically?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in that sense, what happens is you switch over to your reptilian brain, and you are unable to access your prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of your brain, what that allows you to have those conversations, to make proper decisions. So once you're highly stressed out, your ability to communicate decreases. And so the reptilian brain is, again, coming back to what we talked about early on. When you're in that fight and flight response, that's your reptile brain going off. And, that's fine if you're in survival situation where you have to survive, but it's not going to help you, as you noted, when you're in a situation where you're talking to somebody and you're so stressed out, you know the answers, you know what to say, but it just won't come out. I think there's a great opportunity to bring back to talking about where the out breath, because what that's going to do is, that's, like I said, it's going to it's going to calm down that sympathetic nervous system. And so you'll find that you're able to be more clearer in that situation. I think, again, one of the reasons, you're terming it, do people get dumber when they're highly stressed out? But again, it comes back to this. Nobody has ever taught any strategies. Nobody knows what to do when they're really stressed out. I think this is one of the things that's beautiful about the method that I use as martial arts. When, for example, two people are sparring, when they're punching at each other, for example, can be a highly stressful situation. And if you're not present, if you're not focused, if you kind of find yourself going into being, you are unable to attend to what's happening in the moment, and you just spot completely out of control and get yourself deeper and deeper into a hole. And so that ability to be present in the moment is crucial to be able to deal with that situation, and it applies off the mat in the world.
What do you do when life hits you in the head with a brick? Or a hand, or a fist, or a leg? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've been talking about that. I mean, if I can give any suggestion to people listening to this, really take some time to do some research into the mindfulness approach of approaching emotion processes. There's a lot of great information out there. It's definitely becoming more mainstream because everybody's starting to realize that being present when, life throws its punches at you is a deal with the situation, because it's going to do its thing anyway, isn't it? I mean, life throws curveballs. If you like it or not, it's going to happen. Well, you can either sink into despair, or you can learn how to manage those situations better. And one of those ways to do that is to teach yourself how to be more present in highly charged, highly stressful situations.
And to do that is to learn these techniques and then put yourself in that situation?
You can, or what you can do is you can start off with, say, situations that you do struggle with, but think of them in terms of a hierarchy. Which are the ones they kind of stress you out, but they're not that bad? I would take on those ones first. Ones that that you can manage, even though they're still stressful. Get things right there first, and then move on to the bigger ones. I mean, it might be, for example, that you get into your motor vehicle every day, you're on your way to work, and you find yourself just almost becoming, getting yourself into a road rage kind of situation. You get really angry with the way that you drive. Well, there's the thing that you do every day. We can consider it the mundane. It's a fantastic opportunity to practice to be mindful. The minute you feel that response rising up inside of you, or you feel that story running in your head about who's this, can't this guy see me, and you're going off on that tangent, that's the moment to take a step back, breathe, and just observe the thoughts and the feelings as they arise. And if you find yourself attaching to them again, you gently bring yourself back. So start with the mundane. I would argue that a lot of times people want to get really successful at the big things, but is the predictor of success is how people manage the mundane, the things that they just take for granted. If you can't even drive to work and keep calm, how are you going to keep calm in a highly charged, stressful business environment, which often business is, where there's a lot on the line? And so if I was going to employ somebody as an entrepreneur, I wouldn't look at how well they've managed the big things. I want to see how they manage the small things. Because for me, that's a terrible. What is the potential for this person in the future?
So how you do anything is how you do everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's, what you think is what you become is another way to describe it. And I firmly believe that. Everything from how you talk to your wife, how you talk to your children, treat other people, how you do the small little things, how you react when you walk into a store and now there's a queue. These are the things that really stress people out. Even like earlier on, right? We were getting ready for this interview and we had lots of technical issues. We could have got really upset and angry about it, but we took it in our stride and we managed it and we found a solution and we talked. That to me says a lot about how people then are going to achieve success in the future. Because if you can't get those things right, how are you going to get the big things right?
I think that's a really, really good point. Really good point. So we focus on the big things and we think it's all about that, but then we can't even drive to work without getting stressed out or something happens and you get really annoyed. That's really powerful. So what you just said. So what is your favorite book and why is it your favorite book?
Well, okay, so I got lots of favorite books.
Oh, you can only choose one.
Choose one. Okay. Daniel Pink's book, A Whole New Mind. I really like that book. The tagline is why right-brainers will rule the world. But what really stood out for me in that book was the idea of unlikely collaborations, unlikely connections, and talking about how that is going to really put people in a position to be successful in the future. Thinking outside of the box, being creative, not just norm, the status quo. So that's definitely one of my favorite books of all time.
And what favorite entrepreneur do you have? Do you have Steve Jobs or somebody else?
Well, could we consider him an entrepreneur? I'm sure we could. I really like Seth Godin. For me, when I watch Seth Godin talk and the way that he presents his ideas, it really is that whole new mind that Daniel Pink talks about. He really epitomizes that. So when I grow up, I want to be like Seth Godin. It's just amazing the kinds of connections that he can make, where he just connects all these worlds that seem unrelated, but puts it in such a way that it just makes sense. And I think that kind of thinking, that synthesis of bringing varied fields together in a way that's completely novel and unique is an amazing skill to have. So he's definitely one of my favorite all-time quote-unquote entrepreneurs.
I remember reading Purple Cow in university and being blown away by that book.
Exactly.
Amazing guy. So what are your plans for the next 3 years and where can we get more information about you?
Well, for the last 2 decades, I've spent my time really coaching modern martial arts. And as I spoke about early on, I've developed 2 successful martial art lifestyle brands. And now I'm really moving in more to the corporate market and working with entrepreneurs and executives and taking these lessons, these inner management lessons that I have discovered and learnt and have applied to my life and with all my clients over the last 2 decades. That's really becoming my focus for the next 3 years. And to find out more about that process and the book that I wrote that connects to it, people can go to www.fullcontactliving.com.
Cool. So that is fullcontactliving.com. Rodney, this has been... .org.
Yes, .org.
Sorry, .org. So fullcontactliving.org. And you also have some free giveaway. You've got a free course there as well. Is that what's on that course?
Well, what I did is a lot of the stuff we've been talking about in this interview, I put a video course together. It's a complimentary video course that anybody can take. It's built off the framework of my book, Full Contact Living. It presents 6 principles that anyone can use to achieve inner success so that they can go out into the world and become champions.
Fantastic. Guys, go to fullcontactliving.org. Check out the free course. Check out Rodney's book. This has been amazing. This has been great stuff. I've been taking lots and lots of notes here. And guys, if you did enjoy this episode, please do go to iTunes or Stitcher. Write a honest review about the podcast. It really helps us reach a larger audience. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to being with you next time. Thank you, Rodney.
This podcast is brought to you by MrOutsource.com. Outsourcing to the Philippines done for you. Mr. Outsource is a recruitment company matching busy entrepreneurs with Filipino virtual assistants, so you can have the time to focus on what's important.